particularly around the restructure that we've seen in the intensive chicken meat industry over, the last decade or a bit more, sort of since the 2000s, where the intensive chicken meat industry in Victoria and elsewhere frankly got much larger quite quickly. It moved from being on the immediate fringes of the city to significantly further away and to much larger operations. And so that shift in the business, which had already been occurring in stages since the 1970s, when chicken meat became affordable and popular in Australia. It had gone through a couple of waves of doing this. And by the 2000s, we were seeing large chicken meat complexes, if you like, of up to 1 million birds at any one time. Now, that's a big farm, right, by anyone's measure. It's a big farm. They're normally, for people who aren't familiar with them, they usually operate in sort of clusters of sheds that themselves are separated out within the business. That allows for a whole range of management advantages, particularly around quarantine, if there's issues with that particular cluster. They're typically located in places that there's proximity to servicing, as into labour, but also to processing. And so they need to be reasonably close. So they can't be completely in the middle of nowhere. And of course, there's issues like temperature and climate that actually indicate what a good location for those businesses to be in. They have large buffers they require, but they don't look and feel like a farm. And so communities that are concerned with these businesses and who imagine, or really do live in a rural place that they consider to be about farm, particularly landscape-based and land-based farming, then this business looks and feels very differently. The planning systems, of course, that we have, and talk to the Victorian planning system here, of course, sees them as a farm. They might be an intensive farm, but nonetheless, they're a perfectly suitable activity to be undertaken in a rural area under the right conditions. And the community that object to them, at least, are concerned that doesn't fit their idea. So we have this tension that exists. On the one hand, someone says, well, this is a farm. And someone else says, hang on, but it's not a farm like I understand a farm to be. And it's not even like a farm like I understood a farm to exist even 10 years ago. This is not a farm that existed 10 years ago. And you're telling me it's still the same thing. It's a little bit, in an urban context, it's sort of like saying, well, there's a 20-storey apartment block next to you. That's just housing, just like the one that's there already. And we tend to take the view that, of course, we understand those aren't the same thing. But planning systems in rural areas are often a little bit less nuanced. And again, we live in an era where, chicken meat consumption is high. People want a kind of $10 roast chicken from a supermarket, and that's how you get one. Right, but they're going to be near someone. Now, the other side to it is that the environmental controls often mean that they don't have many off-site impacts at all, but they have considerable impacts around what the perception of place might be. And of course, there's a whole set of animal ethics issues underpinning a lot of people's concerns, but people are quite cautious not to build them into the planning problems. And that goes a little bit back to our discussion around apartments and the like, is that people understand what planning triggers might make good arguments for them, but their anxieties are often much wider. Their anxieties are about bigger infrastructure issues in that case that will never be resolved by discussions about an individual permit. And often when we look at things like intensive animal industries, people's anxieties and concerns are often bigger than the development, but the development's the point at which they can discuss it. So that's about opening up politics to bigger discussions about some of these things sometimes.